The jury's still out on whether or not Jadeveon Clowney will come back to Seattle, but even if he does, and especially if he doesn't, the Seahawks are going to need pass rush help. Most people are assuming that since they didn't do much of it in free agency, that's going to come in the draft. So who might be available to Seattle at pick 27 overall? We took a look at 2 edge rushers today in Tom, Jake, and Stacy's off-season spotlight, brought to you by Divorce Lawyers for Men. Let's get started. First up, Penn State's Yetur Matos. 6'5", 266 with a nearly 35-inch arm span. He's a lengthy edge rusher with incredible athleticism. Now, Pete Carroll already values arm length in his cornerbacks especially, but he's shown a preference for that on his defensive line as well. He highlighted that as a strength of defensive tackle Poona Ford. In 3 years at Penn State, 2 as a starter, Yetur Matos has 36.5 tackles for loss and 18.5 sacks. 9 of those came in 2019 alone. The biggest critique is that he's a bit raw and could stand to add a few more pass rush moves. Now, Jake highlighted that a bit more on our podcast. Again, you can listen to that on Tom, Jake, and Stacy's podcast page on 710sports.com. It's in hour 3 from Thursday. Now, there are some defensive line needy teams ahead of Seattle. Yetur Matos has been mocked to the Patriots, for instance, who are in there at 23. Dolphins also ahead of Seattle. The Vikings are an interesting option. They could be without Everson Griffin, and they pick at 22 and 25. So what happens if Matos, for instance, gets off the board before Seattle's there at 27? Well, Jake highlighted another defensive end who could be available around the same spot. That's Notre Dame's Julian Okwara. Okwara is 6'4", 252, a little bit smaller, but by no means a small defensive end. He wasn't a regular starter until the second half of 2018, but even in that time, tied a team-high 8 sacks. He was off to a good start in 2019, but suffered a broken fibula, which cut short his senior season. Now, it's that injury history, combined with some struggles against the run, that has him falling into the second half of the first round, but he's still a lengthy edge rusher with great athleticism and burst, and there's certainly going to be teams looking to make a move on him in those early rounds. And that'll do it today for me, but be sure to tune in, not just from noon to 3 every weekday to listen to me and Tom and Jake on Tom, Jake, and Stacy, but at 2 p.m. on weekdays during the show, Jake Heaps is going to be spotlighting another potential fit for the Seahawks at pick number 27. We started that earlier this week, so if you missed any of those profiles, go to 710sports.com, click on the Tom, Jake, and Stacy podcast page. Those are always to kick off hour 3.